suggest adding CellEd to our collection of electronic resources. And so thankfully I can share some of that background and history as part of my presentation. Okay, so let me just see if I can minimize that so I can see my notes. All right, so if you could go ahead and advance to the next slide, Andrea. So I'd like to start off today by giving you just a taste of what CellEd is and what it has to offer. And we can go to the next slide. So as a visual learner myself, I find videos very helpful as a learning tool. So I wanted to share this video that is produced by CellEd, but it has a lot of information about what it is and what it can do, and it can do so much better than I can. So, Andrea, if you can play the video.
In a world of too much, what if less is actually more? What if a basic phone, a simple call, a short lesson, a text message? In a world of too much, what if less is actually more? What if a basic phone, a simple call, a short lesson, a text message can be combined to create a two-way connection that can make a world of difference for adult learners? Easy to access, easy to use. Just start with a phone and a simple code. Get matched to your right course and coach. Learn skills through audio and texting.
Now, I have a question for you. What day, what day does the person want an appointment for the dentist? Excellent! The person in the dialogue says, "What about Friday?" Great job! Thanks so much for studying with me here at CellEd.
Connect with your coach anytime. Partners can also track progress and encourage learners. Do more than just imagine the possibilities with CellEd.
All right, we can go ahead and advance to the next slide. So CellEd offers lessons in many different topics, not just English. For example, U.S. naturalization test prep, social studies, math, writing, reading, and job skills. So it's more than just English language learning. It can help people prepare for finding a job or excelling in the job they have by improving their English skills. I also want to highlight a few additional details about CellEd. It's available 24/7. You can talk or text with a live coach if you need help as a user. Lessons tend to be about 3 minutes in length, and all you need is either a cell phone or a computer. And the cell phone doesn't have to be a smartphone. It can be an old style flip phone. So just a few considerations for those different types of platforms. For a smartphone, users will need to download the CellEd app, and it's available for Android and Apple devices. And it also works best if they have Wi-Fi or unlimited data. That's recommended. For any mobile phone, users will call the CellEd phone number, and it helps a lot if they have unlimited text and minutes. Then if they're logging on with a computer, a phone number will be required to set up their account initially, but after that, they can just do it all on the computer. So if we could go to the next slide, that would be great. So now I'm going to share about Worthington libraries and our experience with CellEd. Next slide, please. I'll start with a bit of demographic information. So Worthington Libraries is a school district library, and our service area includes the city of Worthington, Linworth, and a significant portion that you can see all the beige in the map is actually Columbus, city of Columbus, but it's kind of all cobbled together into the Worthington School District. Our population for the Worthington School District is around 60,000, and I pulled that data from the American Community Survey in 2021. Next slide, please. There are 3 locations in our system, and we are also one of 17 members of the Central Library Consortium in Central Ohio. The oldest of the 3 locations is Old Worthington in the top left of your screen. It is the more established part of the community with primarily homeowners. It's more walkable, and it is the most affluent part of our service area. On the bottom is Northwest, and that location has tons of families that come. There are also a lot of tutors that like to use the space, and it's more culturally diverse than Old Worthington. And then the third location on the right is Worthington Park, which is my library. That location is actually in a shopping plaza, and our population in our part of the service district is more transient than the other 2 locations. And a really cool thing about our location is that we are a part of everybody's daily routine. They visit the dollar store, they visit Kroger, and then they come to the library. Park is also more culturally diverse than Old Worthington. It's more similar to Northwest. Next slide, please. So in our service area, about 86% of residents speak English only at home, which is higher than the national average. The national average is 79%, but it's lower than the state average for Ohio, which is 93%. Now, 14% of residents speak a language other than English at home, which is lower than the national average, around 21%, but it is higher than the Ohio average of 7%. Just to give you a little idea of what our community makeup is like. Also, for the past several years, Worthington City School District administration has shared data with the library about the languages spoken by families at home. So the library's been able to utilize that information to guide our management of our print international collections. Each of the 3 locations have slightly different coverage of languages because they're tailored to the schools, the data for the schools surrounding their location. At my location, Worthington Park, we have international collections for Spanish, Arabic, and Hindi, and we'll soon be adding Portuguese and Somali. Next slide, please. So you're probably wondering, why did we choose to add CEL-Ed to our collection of resources? And that's a great question. That's why I'm here today. Worthington Libraries takes a team approach, like I mentioned earlier, to managing electronic resources. And that team is made up of technical services staff, IT, an administration liaison, and public services staff representing a variety of levels, as well as adult services and youth services. And I served on that team in 2019 when I started here at Worthington Libraries. One of the initial things that I noticed in our first meeting was that we didn't have any resources for people whose first language isn't English. So I proposed adding a resource to support English language learners and new Americans, and did a little initial research on 3 resources. The first one was CEL-Ed, the second was Foxy, and the third was Pronunciator. I then sent an email to staff and shared a little bit of information about each of the 3 resources and solicited feedback from them. And they said things like, intrigued by Cell Ed with its use of cell phones and how that works. Another staff member said, I especially like that Cell Ed is optimized for mobile use and that they offer a literacy course for native Spanish speakers to improve their reading and writing skills. That seems like a service that would be appreciated by some of our patrons who speak Spanish. So then later in the year, in the fall, we decided to trial both Cell Ed and Voxy. However, during the demo with Voxy, we learned that the resource is set up to be accessed by patrons by assigning individual emails and passwords per license. Unfortunately, there was no way for us to work with that as far as authentication. And so we decided not to go with that resource, even though it looked great and had a lot of great options. So we decided only to launch the trial of Cell Ed to our staff, and then requested feedback from them. And they shared things like, I like that it allows you to choose a language other than English. However, it is disappointing that Spanish is currently the only option. The tempo of the speaking is slower for the initial English learning course to help those with less fluency. Another staff member said the app was easy to navigate and find information, and I like that there is an option to contact a coach. And we did get a little bit of negative feedback. A couple of people mentioned the voice of the English level 1 instructor. They thought they were a little too perky, a little too excited. But the good news is that there are different narrators on the different courses that they checked out at that time. So in the end, they said, let's give it a try. Overall, of all the reviews we got and feedback from staff we received, the average rating was 4 out of 5 stars. So that's pretty good. So then in October, the electronic resources team met and discussed Cell Ed some more. And we talked about things like smart patrons who don't have smartphones, or that they would need unlimited talk and text to utilize the resource, and that being a barrier. There was also some staff who were concerned about user privacy because the account portal, where you can manage the resource from the library's end, that account portal logs information about each of the learners, and any reports that you run include the names and contact information for those users. So the team decided that we would not use that information, that we would keep it private and confidential, and that the portal is managed by our tech services manager. So in the end, we decided that it would be a good resource to add because it is so unique to our collection. So then we looked at pricing options. And since we weren't certain how much interest there would be from our patron base, we decided to go with the 30-seat package, which is the smallest one. And with the understanding from Cell Ed that we could add extra seats for an a la carte price if we needed to do that. So we were able to launch the resource in November of 2019. And as of this month, we are still subscribing to the resource at the 30-seat package. And we have not needed to purchase more seats a la carte, although we did receive a notification from Cell Ed earlier this year that we were getting close to our cap of 30 learners. However, instead of purchasing an a la carte seat, we were able to cancel some of our learners who had been active for a really long time. So that freed up plenty of seats for anybody else interested in checking out the resource. Next slide, please. So when we launched Cell Ed, we wanted to promote it to English language learners. So we wanted to have a flyer, preferably one that was bilingual. So thankfully, Cell Ed had already created such a flyer, and they provided us with a template with Spanish on one side and English on the other, and then space at the bottom for our logo and location information. So our publicity department tailored flyers for each of the 3 locations. So we were able to put location-specific information for each of the 3 locations at the bottom. And then in winter of 2019, the publicity department for the library also wrote a newspaper article about the resources for English language learners and took that opportunity to highlight CEL-Ed to our community. Next slide, please. Over the 4 years we have offered this resource to our patron base, we've seen pretty decent usage in spite of the pandemic. In November and December of 2019, we had 6 active users. They completed 503 lessons, and not surprisingly, the English courses were the most commonly engaged with courses. Then in early 2020, we heard from our CEL-Ed rep that they were impressed with the number of hours some of our users had already logged. So even though it was a small number of users, they were really doing a lot. Next slide, please. All right, so in 2020, our usage grew to 14 active users, and they completed 898 lessons. And the 3 most popular courses that year were Communicating on the Job, English Level 4, and one of the English courses that's in Spanish. Next slide, please. In 2021, there were 10 active users who completed 206 lessons, and the most popular courses were the English courses. Now, this was a year that really dropped off, and we're not really sure why, other than things were just really weird in 2021. So it's hard to tell. The data is not specific enough to really try and figure that out. Next slide, please. Now in 2022, the number of active learners jumped to 18, and they completed 2,676 lessons and across 9 courses. And the most popular courses were the English courses, Building Self-Confidence at Work, and English for Communicating at Work. Next slide, please. So far this year, we have had 11 active users who have completed 594 lessons. And some of the most popular courses this year have been English for Communicating at Work, again, English Level 5, and the Level 1 Reading Skill Builder. So overall, our numbers have ebbed and flowed, but we've continued to see users engage with the content. Next slide, please. So some of Worthington Library staff shared with me some of their experiences in helping staff or helping patrons with CEL-Ed. One staff member shared about a time that they were helping someone and that patron didn't have a smartphone. They were grateful for something that they could use on their old style flip phone. Another shared that they were helping a native Spanish speaking patron who wanted to improve their English skills. And when they mentioned the English conversation groups to them, they were either not interested or just not able to attend. So the staff member showed them the flyer for CEL-Ed and helped them download the app. And they were very, very happy that this was available as an app and really liked the bite-sized sessions. Like I said earlier, the sessions are about 3 minutes each, the lessons. Next slide, please. So I also checked with our technical services manager. Her name is Lara, and she shared that some details about her experience working with CEL-Ed. She said, as far as the product and the vendor, we've been very happy with it, and it does see decent use by our patrons. It's been extremely easy to work with our reps from the company. She also says that the setup was easy and it has been maintenance free, as you can see by the launch checklist. So I included the launch checklist on this slide, just to give you an idea of what steps are involved in getting this resource up and running. The only issue she remembered was that T-Mobile and Sprint users were having trouble accessing it for a brief time, but the issue was quickly fixed by CEL-Ed. That was in 2021. So that might be part of the reason why our numbers were lower that year. But she said nothing has gone wrong since. So she said it's very hassle-free. And finally, she said that we have had a couple of different reps since we launched, but they are all very friendly and helpful and keep us updated with new information about the product and always offer to do tutorials for our staff or help in any way that we need. We also get a quarterly usage report from them. Next slide, please. So in addition to CEL-Ed, Worthington Libraries offers multiple resources to patrons who are English language learners, including a Conversations in English program that meets monthly at the Worthington Park location. We also offer a curated list of English language learning groups in Central Ohio that is updated annually by staff at Worthington Libraries. There are ESOL collections at each of the 3 locations that contain books, citizenship kits, and launch pads. The launch pads cover topics like English writing and English spelling, ESL English grammar, and learn US law. There are also international collections at each location, as well as a few magazines and movies. Each building has slightly different coverage of languages, depending on the most common languages spoken by children at the schools nearest them. And another resource is last year, one of our staff curated a new collection of adult readers specifically for English language learners that we're calling Easy Books in English. We are piloting that collection at the Worthington Park location right now. We also curate several permanent and quarterly displays each year to highlight our international collection, diverse titles, and immigrant voices. Another service that we offer is there are citizenship and naturalization test prep books and flashcards. And as well as each location has a citizenship resource center that contains forms and information on those topics. We're getting close to the bottom of the list. We have language learning electronic resources, including Lingo Lite, Mango Languages, and Transparent Language. And lastly, in 2022, we launched a language interpretation service that is called Language Line. There are iPads at each of the service points with the app for Language Line loaded on it already. And the staff can use that to communicate with people. And it has 200, at that time, there were 240 different language options, including American Sign Language. So if it's not a resource that's familiar to you, it might be worth checking out. Next slide, please. So thank you for inviting me to visit and share information about Worthington Library's experience with CEL-Ed. Do you have any questions?
Thank you, Amanda. This is Hillary. I'm going to drop it in the chat a few other libraries that I found also had CEL-Ed too, if that's okay.
Oh yeah, sure.
There was a question in the chat too. I don't know if you saw about CEL-Ed offering an all access model. Do you know if that's
all access in what way?
She had to leave, so I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. All access in terms of unlimited users?
Somebody's shaking their head. Yes, maybe. I'm not sure.
It looks like she said they're moving away from seat-based models, so I'm assuming that that's what she would be.
Possibly. So let me pull up. I have a folder that I gathered all of my information in, and let me just pull up. Now this is back in 2019, so it's probably changed a lot since then, but they were offering a 30 package rate, a 100 package rate, 200, 500, 1,000, and 5,000. And then they offer an a la carte pricing option. Does that answer your question?
I think that at least gives her some information.
Yeah,
Sure.
I would recommend contacting Cell Ed, and they can share more updated pricing information as far as 2023 goes. I don't have that information because I'm not involved in the electronic resources team any longer. So that's just not information that I have. Are there any other questions?
Provided a lot of information, Amanda. This is great. I appreciate hearing about some of the other resources that you're offering too, the language translation or the interpretation service.
Yeah, Language Line has been great. It has saved us a lot in being able to communicate with patrons whose language skills for English are not as strong, shall we say. And it works great because you can hold the iPad in front of you and they can see the interpreter and you can talk with them and they can talk with the interpreter, and it just works really great.
How did you learn about that process? I don't want to take us too much away from Cell Ed, but if it's okay, how the language translation, how did you learn about that, and how, yeah.
I think we were interested in investigating that just before the pandemic. I know when I've gone to the doctor's office, I've seen, and I think it's the exact same company, I've seen flyers on each of the desks at the service points with the languages listed that you can just point to and say, that's the language I'd like to speak in, and they'll do the same thing that we do here in the library and pull it up on an iPad or a tablet or something like that, be able to communicate in their own language as part of the transaction. And so I think when a lot of other staff had that same experience, and so we were just like, we need this because we've had enough experiences, especially trying to help people with technology, where it's been really challenging to communicate effectively. And although Google Translate is useful, it's a little hard to use on the floor. So so this has worked really great for us.
Is there kind of a lag time, like when the interpreter connects and then once the translation starts happening, is there a lag time there too?
It takes a moment to connect, but once you're connected, there really isn't a lag, which is great. And you see the person on the screen. So it's a live person, and they're able to and everything, which is very handy.
And we've got a question about pricing for Language Line, and even a ballpark. Do you have any idea about how pricing?
No, I can poke around here and see if there's anything. I'm looking at our shared drive. Literacy, no. Let me do a quick search for Language Line.
While Amanda's looking for that, I maybe I can ask a question of some of the other folks that are on the call today, those of us that work at state libraries. Has anybody been investigating either Language Line or Cell Ed for like statewide access for libraries? I'm really curious if, again, getting back to, you know, what pricing, but also the model for, you know, buying seats and that kind of thing. That's not typically the way we look at resources here at the state level. So I'm curious if anybody's been looking into that at all.
We have it in Maine as part of the Bendable project, but I don't know what the final pricing was that was negotiated on that. I think Lori Fisher or Marika Visser would have that information. I can certainly see if I can find out how that was negotiated and kick it out to the listserv if that will be okay.
That'd be great. Thanks, Lisa.
Yeah, I didn't really know too much about Cell Ed. And I was wondering if it was a competitor for North Star, but it really doesn't look like it is at all because it's about language learning. And one thing that I was curious about was, given all of the language services that you offer, especially with like the conversation classes and stuff, do you think that the Cell Ed subscription is reaching different people? Or do you think that it's another way for people to then be able to interact with the other things happening in the library? And then sort of along those lines, do you know anything about like an age range or the type of user for Cell Ed? Like, are they younger or older or anything like that?
We don't. So we do have access to that information, but for privacy's sake, we are not looking at it. So we have not investigated age range. But as far as overlap with English Conversation Group, currently our English Conversation Group, along with all of our other programs, we're still trying to rebuild after the pandemic. And so our numbers are pretty low, like 6, 8, 9 people attending semi-regularly. So given that our numbers kind of fluctuate, but fluctuate higher than that, I would say there's a good chance there's some overlap, but there's certainly some people that are accessing it instead of coming to English Conversation Group.
Thank you.
And the 2 staff that run the English Conversation Group did tell me that they promoted it when we first got it. And they do remember having one individual ask them for help in getting it set up, but beyond that, there really hasn't been any, it just hasn't come up in conversation during the program.
Amanda, I think I directed you wrong. The person who was asking about the pricing was actually asking for Cell Ed pricing, not Language Lem.
Oh, okay.
I'm so
Good.
sorry about that.
Well, good, because I can't find anything about pricing for Language Line. I wasn't part of the ad hoc working team that launched that service, so that's just not information that I have at my fingertips. I could find that information, but it would be more than a year old probably. So if you're really interested in Language Line, probably contacting them directly would be best, because then you would get up-to-date information.
Sure.
And they'd probably be very excited to do a trial. We did a trial here for about a month, just like we do with any of our electronic resources, and gave staff the opportunity to try it out with patrons and get a feel for it and provide feedback. And then based on that data, they decided to go ahead and launch it as a service.
Cool. I think Lori Moore has a question.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Amanda. That was all great information. We are using Cell Ed at my library, Multnomah County Library, as well. Although I haven't had much experience with it as a workforce librarian, our adult literacy team has sort of overseen it. So it's helpful to learn your experiences, but I just wanted to throw it out to the group. You're welcome to send other questions my way, and I'll connect you with that team, and they may be able to answer similar or different questions that Amanda is getting as well.
That sounds great. What other questions do you have?
So does anybody have an idea of pricing for Cell Ed?
The pricing information I have is 4 years old, but I can tell you for the package rate that we went with of 30 seats, it was $2,395. And there's a note on there that that's a savings of 10%.
I actually just talked to CellEd a couple of months ago about their business module. I finally dug up the PDF she sent me. So there's two packages. There's the skill builder and the essentials. Skill builder is actually like the basic bare bones package. It's $4.95 a year for setup, and then $15 per seat for annual learner license. And I could type all this into the chat in a minute. And then the essentials, which is the full package, $3,000 for setup, and then $60 per seat. But that includes like the one-to-one live coaching support, the full course catalog. But it looks like they are still working on a user seat model. They probably are not set up to deal with like the state library all access model, because that's just not how your average tech company rolls.
Yeah, well, I did see a news article that the state of New York is providing access to CellEd, or at least was providing access to CellEd through the government, not through the library. So that's another interesting fact, and maybe maybe there's a contact if you do a Google search for CellEd. I think it also shows up on CellEd's website, but there's a link to the video that they had on like a nightly news program, and they interviewed somebody from the city of New York government, or not the city of New York, the state of New York. So that might have a little bit, they might be able to answer more questions or share experiences that might be more comparable to what a state library might want to provide in interacting with the resource.
I'm really impressed by the number of hours that people are putting into it. And I wonder if that's because it's texting, and so you can kind of do it anytime, and people don't necessarily know what you're doing. You could just be texting a friend. So there's, you know, you can take it with you, but it's not like, I don't know, some other things where maybe it's more obvious what you're doing on your phone. So I think those numbers are really incredible. So great job.
Well, thank you. And we, to be honest, we haven't been heavily promoting it, other than when we first added it to the collection. So this is all just based on people stumbling across it and or finding information about it in our international ESOL collections, because we put flyers there, and also in our community resources area. And then anytime patrons are up at the desk and it seems appropriate, we mention it then too.
I was looking at their website and it looks like they do have more than just English language learning. They have, well, Andrea, you had mentioned digital skills, and it lists that. Also lists life and health skills, premium credentialed programs, whatever that is, and STEPS, educational success, whatever that is. Vocational language learning, work ready ELL, in addition to the other like adult reading and writing, math and stuff that Amanda already talked about. $60 a seat though is kind of steep.
It is, though. The real-time coaching is, you know,
Yeah,
pretty nice service.
Yeah, it's just, you know, for us to launch it,
Oh,
I
yeah.
mean, city of Seattle, it's like we're not going to buy less than probably 100 to start.
Right.
I would think, and you know, that's start to get up there.
That's steep, and to reach the folks that this is really helpful for is another big reach. I'm talking to a couple of local groups that work with the migrant farm workers here down here in Southern Oregon, because I think this would be perfect for them if their flip phones work way out in the Applegate. That's what I'm trying to figure out, because they're way out there in the hills, in the mountains.
Well, and I'd be worried too about, you know, Amanda mentioned like if it's unlimited texting and data, that's one thing, but I would hate for somebody to get into trouble and end up with a huge cell phone bill that.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that
Yeah.
too.
Mhm.
Yeah. But these folks, you know, are very, very limited in being able to get to the library, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So it's one way to get out there.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why we haven't jumped yet, but I am very intrigued, especially with the business skills module that LAPL helped them put together, with like how to manage your money, how to use the cashless payment. They were targeting their food truck vendors.
Mm.
And I know they've had some success with that. That's what alerted me to this. So I keep looking at it. I keep thinking, gee, that sounds great.
Yeah, I've been wondering if they would, because they have done those kinds of partnerships to help, you know, with the development of the content. If they could, you know, if it was like, if you could buy modules that were specifically targeted to like a service you wanted to provide, if that could, you know, be negotiated with some kind of, you know, different kinds of pricing models based on how much of the full content you really wanted. And I mean, you know, that's the problem, is that, you know, some of these you're paying for all of it, but you're not even really quite sure what pieces of it are going to get used. And maybe that's the argument, you know, for like, you know, kind of starting small and then kind of seeing where the usage is and then putting more resources into it. So.
Well, and that's the approach we decided to take here at Worthington. And although the number of people using it is pretty small, it's they are engaged, and maybe there are opportunities to collaborate with either the city or the state government or get a grant to at least try it out for a year and see what kind of response you get and answer those questions that you're just not sure if people will use it. Because that was certainly a question that came up for us when we were thinking about it.
Amanda, have you gotten any feedback about the patrons using it, running up against their own data and text limits?
No, we haven't gotten any feedback or any concerns or complaints.
Okay.
So, and I looked back through our help desk ticket system as well and didn't see anything there.
That's good to know.
How does they define an active user? Sorry.
I'm sorry, could you repeat your question?
How do they define an active user?
Oh, that's a good question. Let me see. They've got an FAQ list at the bottom of their pricing sheet that I have open.
This is one of those situations where you wish that with all of the intent for congressional spending to go to digital inclusion, you know, and digital equity, like that this could just happen on some sort of a national thing where you could slap down some kiosks, you know, for connectivity, because this is one of those situations, thinking about, you know, Rosalind's group, that 100% would meet the definition of a library kiosk, you know what I mean, for connectivity purposes, no problem. I don't even think the FCC could question that one. And you know, for E-rate purposes, and then just have like because I mean, the bigger you go with your potential audience, usually the lower, you know, the cost comes down. But just rather than making every single state, even, never mind, you know, the subunits of the states have to go after, you know, and go through all the hoops and everything, and you know it's going to cost more to do it that way in the long run. I wish it could be deployed nationally, you know, for some areas that, I don't know, maybe the state libraries could say, hey, this is where we need some help here. whether it's connectivity, because I don't know if there's any vendors from cell companies here. Hope not, but if you're out there listening on YouTube, your coverage maps are made of lies.
Yeah, I've been to a few community meetings with Spectrum who are purporting to bring fiber out to the Applegate, and boy, they are not ready for those people. Because yeah, you can bring fiber down the main road, but if somebody lives 2,000 feet up, or do they have the money to pipe down to the main road? No, that's a whole lot of money if you're just a alpaca farmer. Yep. Now, if you're growing weed, you've got the cash, but you may not be admitting it.
And you can't deal with federal funds.
And you can't deal with federal funds anyway.
Don't want to
so
know about
that's
that
just
part.
right out. I did find my pricing sheet, and I figured out how to paste it in the chat. So
I do like that idea, though. Weed for speed. I think
there
would
you
be
go.
great. There's a grant.
Well, we've got a whole system in Oregon that regulates the industry, and so yeah, and
yeah,
so,
but
yeah,
there's a whole big black market industry too. Still, unfortunately, that's what all the farmers complain about. The legal guys jump through all these hoops, and they're still undercut by black market weed. Anyway, I put the pricing sheet in the chat. Hopefully the attachment works. So that's what the Cell Ed rep gave me a couple months ago when I had the demo with them.
Well, Elizabeth, I couldn't find anything about how they define an active learner, but I can certainly ask our technical services manager and see if she knows. And if not, she could contact our rep and find out.
No, that's okay. I think on that pricing sheet that Rosalind dropped in the chat, it said something about the very bottom, transferable licenses, inactive licenses of more than 6 weeks can be transferred to a new learner once per academic semester.
Elizabeth, I wonder if instead of making it something that you advertise widely, because then you might have people who sign up, check it out, and then they don't do anything.
Yeah.
If you gave people accounts as part of another program, then you would reduce the number of licenses you would need and at least find out what the usage is like. And if you get, good usage rates or like a lot of time, then you could justify spending more on it.
Well, and I do remember from our demo that a user has 30 minutes after they log in to explore. And if they log out before that 30 minutes is up, their account is not finalized. So it doesn't take up one of the seats.
That's reasonable.
That's really smart.
Yeah.
Because then that also takes care of any like library staff that want to go in and poke around so that they know how to use it, but they aren't going to use it past that.
Right.
Yeah.
Just depends on what that log out process is. If it's just like closing the app or leaving the app open but ignoring it. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, that the price without the interactive coaching is, $15. So, but I don't know the definition between basic courses and full course catalog. But yeah, I think if it were part of a bigger program, that would maybe make sense.
In that document on the first page, it says Cell Ed's Essential Skills Program. And so it lists some of the courses, and the ones with the asterisks are not part of Skill Builder. So Skill Builder is like the bare bones package. So that includes the digital skills, the business skills, the work ready, and looks like English on the go, and the citizenship and civics. So that gives you some idea of what's in there.
I guess I keep coming back to, this is similar to at least Oregon's experience with North Star digital literacy, in the sense that you know, some of these kinds of e-resource tools really fall outside of the normal library practice in terms of how, not only the pricing piece of it, but also just how you use them. And I think that I continue to kind of learn from hearing about libraries' experiences around this, is that these tools work best not sitting on a website and hoping people will find them, but they're actually used in conjunction with other kinds of programming. It sounds like Amanda and Worthington, they haven't done a whole lot of that and have had, you know, decent usage, but I do think that certainly based on our experiences with helping libraries with North Star, that is the thing. These are not things that libraries can use effectively in a purely passive way, that there really needs to be some connection, either active outreach and promotion or using it in conjunction with specific programs, that I think is a challenge for libraries, right? And you know, and the theme has come up a lot in these discussions about, you know, tools are great, but unless you really do put the work in for promotion and outreach or programming, that they may not, you know, our usual ways of measuring success in terms of, you know, volume of use probably aren't the right ways to be looking at these kinds of resources, and that we really need to think about, like Andrea was pointing out, you know, the hour spent on a resource is maybe a bigger, you know, a better way to demonstrate, you know, it was useful to a group of people rather than looking at the size of the group of the people, But anyway, you understand what I mean. So I think that is the challenge for those of us working, I think, at the state library level, is, you know, these are models for, or these tools are making a step outside of traditional library e-resource models. And I think it's a good thing. I think we need to think more broadly and thinking about how tools go with programming and outreach services. So.
Well, and we took a different tack with North Star when we launched it. So we launched it, and then our staff who do computer learning workshops started using it exclusively for the content for the computer learning workshops. And they're just drop-in hours basically, where someone can come in, we'll help them get set up, and they can pick their own like path that they want to take, their own content, and then we're just there to help troubleshoot. So I don't know if a similar approach could be taken to CEL-Ed or not. We haven't tried that here, and we haven't done any programming specifically with the idea of promoting CEL-Ed yet. Like I said, we're still trying to regain our footing after COVID, particularly when it comes to programming, especially for adults.
And forgive me if you mentioned this and I spaced it. Courses that are completed, there's a credential at the end of that, correct?
I don't actually know, but I could find out if you would like.
I think it would be interesting to know.
Their website says premium credentialed programs, whatever that means.
Okay.
I mean, I'm just looking at you scroll down on their homepage, like this is pretty near the bottom.
If it's okay to introduce a slightly or related but slightly off topic. I'm Lori. I'm interested in how there's the adult literacy ELL that's using this, and you're from workforce development, and that got me thinking that we have had in the past a very similar, you know, workforce development is one piece, and then adult basic education ELL is like another piece. But I'm wondering how it is in other states or other libraries. Like, do you look at them as being connected? Are they connected only sometimes? Are they separate? Like, how do those pieces fit together? Because like, I'm even looking at CEL-Ed where it does have some workforce readiness components, but it it doesn't really feel like it's a workforce development tool specifically, so.
And actually, we're in the same department.
Okay.
So they do GED and adult literacy, they do workforce development, and we do a lot of overlap.
Okay. Very nice.
Oh, Lisa, I can find out. I'll talk with our technical services manager and see if she knows the answer to your question. And if she doesn't, I'll ask if she can contact the rep and find
Well,
out.
Given that we're using it here in Maine, I should probably be able to find out on my end too.
Okay.
So I'll inquire there first before I send you off on a wild goose chase. Because most of the stuff that we were supposed to have issuing any kind of a credential through that platform, that larger platform of Bendable, we're hoping to align with Badger, which, you know, and that may just be up to the customer to decide how they want to do that. You know, so it may have flexibility, but I'll look at it on my end, and if I just can't find anything out, I'll swing back around.
That sounds good. Well, and the rep for your library system should also be able to answer that question too, just like our contact. But I'm happy to help if you need me.
Andrea, I wanted to get back to your question a little bit, just because I do think it's a really interesting conversation about how, you know, the concept of digital inclusion is really like showing how some of these areas, workforce development, you know, adult basic education, how they really truly do overlap, but the people working in those sectors aren't necessarily overlapping with each other. And I do think that we were finally yesterday, we finally have someone in our broadband office here in Oregon who is going to be focused on, you know, the state planning around digital inclusion. And I really do think there's this opportunity with the state planning that's going on to really try to bring all of those people to the same table and see where there is overlap and where they can collaborate. And I was trying to make the case that I, as you know, working with libraries, have been trying to investigate all of these different, you know, ecosystems that are out there, and the degree to which it's clear that we need people to help convene these collaborations. And I guess I keep thinking that maybe is my best role in terms of trying to just build those connections with these different groups. It's interesting because here in Oregon, we're it sounds like there, you know, our adult basic education is basically pretty much administered through our community college system, and that aspect of some of the program or some of the curriculum at these colleges are actually being targeted for budget cuts, which I just find amazing, that given everything that's going on with the importance of digital inclusion, that piece of it, which is a wonderful way to you know, be a base for outreach to the targeted groups for digital inclusion funding, you know, to have that just go away in the community college system here in Oregon, I think specifically just really worries me in terms of the success of that federal money coming down. Getting back to that earlier issue is like, wouldn't it be great if the feds helped us with infrastructure, because of the fact that the state's infrastructures are so incredibly different around these areas. So I've been thinking a lot about that issue. So.
That is so wild for me to hear, because in Maine, we were hearing that, at least with our senators, that adult ed was like really becoming more of a priority for them. I just can't imagine why that would be targeted for budget cuts. Like, what problem is that solving?
Well,
I'm not sure.
And as Elizabeth says, I mean, it's in a role, you know, because it's the way, you know, the colleges are looking at they have to self-fund because they don't get enough, state funding. So they're looking at the programs that generate income and all of those kinds of things. So there's like marketplace reasons for this, but there aren't, the right kinds of reasons for it. And the other thing that's really ironic in all of this is in some of these institutions, that's where, the staffing and faculty are the people of color in their so they're cutting programs, and then all of a sudden, their diversity in their actual institution actually goes away as well. So yeah, it's kind of a shocking thing, but it has to do with, a lack of state level funding for, these programs to begin with. So
I think Amanda's going to have to leave for desk duty. So, but if you've got any other questions, you're welcome to send them to me, and I can send, or she's, I think, provided her email address too. But thank you, Amanda, for being here. What a phenomenal presentation you did. Thank you again so much.
Oh, you're so welcome. It was my pleasure. And yeah, any questions, feel free to send them directly to me or send them to Hillary and she'll get them to me. And I wish you all the best of luck with researching CellEd and seeing if it'll work with your library systems. Have a wonderful day.
You too.
Goodbye.
Thank you.
All right. So usually we do see some people dropping off at 3 o'clock. So the recording is still going for anything that we talk about, but whatever you want to do with the rest of the 24 minutes is good with me. If we want to keep talking, if we want to give some time back, it's all good. Oh, okay. So we'll have a hard stop at 3:15.
Or you can all just go on without me. That's
Yeah. Yeah, I've been trying to figure out how everything fits together. And the more I learn in New Jersey, the more questions I have. But it just seems like everybody working on things their own way. There's just not one entity at the top who's orchestrating everything. Because in New Jersey, GED is under Department of Education, but then adult education is under Department of Labor. But then there's people who are participating in adult education and English as a second language and all of that, who aren't doing it because they want to get a job. So it's weird. But then you have like literacy volunteers that do a lot, and libraries do a lot, and community colleges are doing their own thing. So I'm not sure even follow the money or anything like that.
well, and I think in some ways, it's not bad to have, the concept of wraparound services means that, meet people where they are. And so, the fact that, that they're getting help through a work source center and they also need help with language learning and or whatever it is, I think that's, meet people when they come in for the service, but making sure that all those that are participating in those services has that level of awareness of where, where they could go to get more support for things that, we don't do language learning in WorkSource, but we definitely know you can go to the library or, wherever it is to get more support for that. And I think that's the trick is getting, not necessarily thinking that all of the services should be coordinated, but that all of the services have knowledge about what's going on in the other fields so they can effectively collaborate. And here in Oregon, I mean, it has to do with just the way, government structures and stuff are, that everybody tends to get very siloed. And I think the silos got worse during the pandemic to some degree. So the degree to which we in the library, that again, thinking about what I can do about that is if I can, see that bigger ecosystem and then try to convene some of these conversations or help with those conversations, I think that can be really good. And it is really traditional to what libraries do, in the sense that we pull from a lot of different places to provide information and resources. So I think it is kind of a natural part of library work as well. So
Yeah. That's a good way of thinking about it.
I kind of think of us as like, you know, the whole 80 small thing. You know, when you go to the mall, you look for like the general entrance if possible, because otherwise you're going through Porches, but you're doing the walk of shame because you're not going to buy anything from Porches. You're just shuffling through to get to the rest of the mall. You know, and that's going through an anchor store is how it feels like going through a particular agency for something. Like if we don't understand what our complementary resources out there do, how on earth is somebody in crisis supposed to understand that? Like, why are we putting that work off onto them? You know what I mean?
exactly. That's exactly right. Yeah. I mean, it is the ultimate navigator, I guess. And you know, we have the digital navigator, we have the health I mean, we have all these different navigator concepts, but really you know, what the library can be is the one that doesn't have the designation before it, and it is just a navigator.
Yeah, one of those big
And
things that you say, like, you are here, you know what I mean? And this is where everything else is. I wish there was a social map for that, you know?
yeah. And it'd be
Like,
so fascinating to see how those maps are different from state to state or even community to community within a state. Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
sure, because people do move around and, you know, like what flu, you know, in one state isn't going to fly in another. But United.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing, you know, that was interesting in this conversation I was having the other day is that, you know, the concept of, you know, a lot of the digital inclusion stuff really, you know, focuses on bringing community-based organizations into the fold to really help with that outreach piece. And it assumes that there are those organizations out there in all parts of the state. And my colleague Roslyn, who, you know, was talking about the situation in Southern Oregon, I mean, those kinds of groups aren't necessarily there in different parts of the state. So where are you going to turn to if that's, you know, if you want to do a state plan that really involves those groups, yet you don't have that, you know, grassroots, you know, organizations in those communities. And honestly, I think the argument is why there's so much discrepancy around the state is because we don't have those groups, and that's why we have the disparity that we have. And so we can't necessarily think that solution is going to be the thing that fixes the issue. So there's a digital divide for a reason, and and, you know, we have to think more creatively about how to reach those that are still on that part, in that part of it. So.
I love talking with you guys so much. It always kind of polishes off my why every month. I have to bounce for another meeting, but this was really great today. Thank you so much. And what are we doing next month again?
Chat GPT, I believe.
That's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I'm gonna update the Outlook information because we also have June scheduled. So all of that stuff will be in there, and I'll also send out the recording, and I'll see if I can send out the slides as well.
It's good to see you guys. Thank you so much.
Good to see
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
All right, I guess I will end the recording.